we found out that there was an opportunity for this new service that companies wanted. Was sending text messages to businesses, and that was how Inalambria was born. I would say that the magical moments happen at the beginning, when you have this huge whiteboard and you start doing things on that, and you get input from your team, basically launching it in record time. Companies being started from zero, very small teams that are going to be just doing the work that normally a company of 10x the size would normally do. So imagine the power of that. Imagine the power of someone would call them the power of the rebels. Yeah, because they have the power and they have the tools to do more things with less.
Welcome to the Lost Entrepreneur Podcast. For all the first-time listeners, I am Sebastian Romero, and today we have with us Carlos Sierra, the founder of Twnel and Inalambria Internacional. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Sebastian. It was great to be here with in your podcast. I really love what you're doing, so congrats.
Thank you. So getting right into the questions,
Sure.
What were you expecting to be an entrepreneur when you were growing up?
I think the quick answer for that is no, to be very honest. So I didn't have any expectations of being an entrepreneur. In fact, when I was growing up, the word entrepreneur was not a very common word back in Colombia. So I grew up in Colombia, in Bogota, Colombia, born and grew up there. So I think, however, there are three. I would say that three factors that influenced this idea of becoming an entrepreneur. So the first one, I think it was my parents and the example that they gave me. So I had my dad. My dad used to be a fighter plane pilot for the Colombian Air Force. So he would tell me stories about how I would just go there and fly and get close to the moon and see the curve of the Earth. So those kind of things I really found very exciting. But what really inspired me from that example was that my dad, he was very passionate about what he was doing. So he really pursued his passion, and that was the main takeaway there. My mom, on the other side, she used to be a teacher, a middle school teacher. So she taught me the discipline, the perseverance, and the importance of hard work, and that's something that you need when you start a company. So that's the first point. So it's my parents' example. The second thing was the years when I started to be very curious about what was going on especially in the internet industry. So I had a chance to move from Colombia to the US and to finish my high school in the US. And those were the times where we were just starting to see the first online services come up. So the American Online, the Prodigies, all those first services that were the pioneers of the internet revolution. So I was exposed very early on to those, and that just sparked something in my head from the very beginning. And I would say that the third thing that influenced was the fact that I was I did my undergrad in electrical engineering. I first wanted to be a pilot, like my dad, but I then decided to ride the internet wave. So those were the times where there was just a huge opportunity around the internet. You didn't know what was going to happen, but you knew that something was going to happen. So basically, I just went for it. I decided to do an undergrad in tech, in electrical engineering. And from there on, the rest is history. Yeah.
So
the quick answer to your question: no, I didn't expect to be an entrepreneur. I just became one because of a lot of factors. Yeah.
How come you didn't get pulled into, like, let's say, the .com bubble or something like that?
Well, in fact, I was part of that. I mean, so during the last years of my undergrad and in electrical engineering, I witnessed the whole explosion of the bubble. Precisely in those years, the whole hope for the industry was lost. It was lost from. It was. I still remember that it was like in March, April, 2000 or 2001, I think, and suddenly everyone lost all the hope that they had on the internet industry. However, months later, I started playing around and started seeing how there was something else that was going to happen, that was happening back there, which was the initiation of a new revolution, which was called the mobile internet revolution. So that was the beginning of the first company that we started, and we started with a couple of friends from school. And that was my first real entrepreneurial experience. Yeah.
So, what made you pursue S Wireless over your job as a Microsoft software developer? Did the power of
Yeah, well,
communication stand out to you there, or did you realize it like in Microsoft?
Well, Microsoft was an interesting exercise. I was not an official developer. I was an intern. So this was during my undergrad years. So I was working part-time as an intern, and also I was doing my last semesters of engineering. So the whole idea of just taking advantage of this new wave that I was seeing, which was the mobile internet revolution, was just fascinating. So I remember and myself and a friend of mine and myself, we basically went and did our thesis. We had to do the thesis, and we did it on a very technical subject related to a technology that was going to be part of that revolution, which in that time it was called the wireless access protocol. So we had simulations on that. We had a lot of technical work that we did back then, but that was the beginning. So basically, the first company was this transcoding company. So the business that we were in back then was to transform websites into mobile websites. We're talking about 2001, and the technology was very restrictive. You couldn't browse the internet like you were doing it. You can do it right now on a phone. Those were times where phones were very limited in terms of bandwidth, screen size, black and white kind of experience. So you really had to struggle to build things around those new standards that were coming up. But we made something that was innovative, I think, for the time, which was to transcode websites into mobile websites without the content owners having to do anything. So we would just go to a mobile operator, or we just knock the door for a big website company, and then we'll tell them, hey, we can build your mobile website so you can extend your presence into this new world that it's going to happen. And that was the beginning of the company. So that was S Wireless. So that was much more attractive in terms of the size of the opportunity than working at Microsoft, which was a big company also back then. Yeah.
Did you have that idea before, or did you have the idea right after you saw like the .com bubble pop, or were you thinking of an idea before that, before the pop?
I think it was during the process, but I think something that helped a lot was I used to travel a lot back and forth from Colombia to the U.S. So when you back then, when you would go to the U.S., you would see the future, because the U.S. was like 2-3 years ahead of time in that sense. So basically, I would go travel, see the future, and go back to Colombia and see, wow, this is not happening here yet. So how do we make it happen? And so those kind of things were very helpful back then when you had this idea of starting something.
What made you decide to stop S Wireless and start Inalambria Internacional?
Yeah, I didn't really stop S Wireless. We had to stop it because we basically run into a wall. So what happened back then was that we put all our eggs into one basket, and that basket was the standard and the technology that we thought was gonna just take off for mobile internet. So the technology, as I mentioned, was the wireless access protocol, and that was like the beginnings of it was a markup language for phones. So it's the equivalent of web, but for phones. So things were not working as expected, not because of the technology was not working on our side. It was because there was not user adoption at the end. So in Colombia, we ended up having just a couple of I don't know, 1,000 phones connected to these networks, but there was not mainstream adoption. So and this was not a problem just in Colombia, but it also happened in the US, it also happened in Japan, it also happened in Europe. So what ended up happening was that operators just had to close those networks and just shut them down. And they had to start looking for new ways to use their networks. And that's where we started doing some experiments with messaging. So back then, phones were used for phone calls. They were started to be used for browsing with this limited browsing capability, but they were very common. It was very common for them to use messaging services, so text messaging, and that was the beginning of Inalambria. The short story about Inalambria is we did a few experiments. We set up a website in a couple of days, and that website would allow people to send messages to each other, because that was the only way to send messages in Colombia, through websites. So we started doing this experiment. We started getting some attention from companies who started knocking our door, asking us if they could send messages as well for their customers and so forth. So again, from a very humble experiment that we did with a company that was just going down, we found out that there was an opportunity for this new service that companies wanted. It was sending text messages to businesses, and that was how Inalambria was born. Yeah.
How did you handle that doubt? Because I know personally, I would be just ridden with what's the next step? How are we going to pivot? How did you handle that mentally?
That's a good question. To be honest, I don't remember. I think it was just instinct, Sebastian. I mean, it's about just you have to do something, otherwise you will just. Worst case scenario for us was we had to go and look for a job, because and that was not a bad case at all. I mean, we were very fortunate to be living with our families. We didn't have any responsibilities. So I think that those first years of your life are just the best years in case you want to really take some risks. And in our case, I think it was just a natural thing to do. We had to do something to survive. We had done some experiments with messaging, and we thought, wow, it looks like there is something here. And it was born out of a personal need. I mean, we wanted to send messages to our friends. How do we set up this service that you can just go one place and broadcast to all the operators? And it turns out that became something that was interesting for companies. So, and that was the spark moment. So if this company is asking for this, I'm sure there are more companies that want that. And that's how we started. Then later on, we had to basically start knocking doors to every mobile operator in the country, telling them, look, we have this potential business model, potential service. Are you interested in selling me text messages? And all of them said no. But after months and months, we pretty much convinced them. And the rest, again, is history. Yeah.
How did the startup process differ between S Wireless and Inalambria Internacional? Did you bring over your previous team, or did you just completely start the new project by yourself?
So part of the team went to the new company. I think it was a very natural transition. I think we really knew we were not fixed with a technology or something specific. We really wanted to do something impactful, and we saw SMS text messaging as that opportunity. So I think it was a nice transition to be honest. We went out and raised some money from an angel investor, and that's my current partner at the company that I'm leading right now. So we ended up being very good friends. Things were very good back then, and with a lot of patience. This was the time where venture money was not very common. I mean, actually, the word venture capital in Colombia in the year 2001 was unheard of. So so again, it was just I joke sometimes when I talk to entrepreneurs and I tell them that back then there was no venture capital industry. It was just you, an idea, and some backpack, but you would just go there and knock doors and ask people for money and tell them that you had an idea and you could make that happen. So those were very different times. Fortunately, things worked out, and that company started growing, and it was just a matter of years where the whole SMS text messaging revolution just exploded. And yeah, I'm still part of that, but I'm not in the operation right now. Yeah.
How do you think your path to success with Inalambria Internacional would have differed if you didn't have that angel investor?
Well, I think it would have been harder because even though it was not too much money back then, Sebastian, the biggest costs that you had for a startup were the infrastructure costs. I mean, the servers, the connectivity, putting your service in the cloud or on a server somewhere, or having everything up and running. The salaries were not existent, so we were basically raising money just to keep the servers up and running, so we could bill customers, or we could basically sell the services. Later on, we started paying ourselves salaries, but I think it was crucial. I mean, it was very important at the beginning for us to have some support to make sure that the product was ready. So I think that was our main goal there, just to keep servers up and running all day.
What made you create Twnel on top of Inalambria Internacional? I know that you, like you said, you moved from leading it to board member. But yeah.
Yeah. So Inalambria started growing as a company. So we started three guys from school from the previous company, and then we got our investor. After that, we started getting some sales reps, and then more tech guys to help build the product. And overnight, it became a company, maybe 35 person company. And we started growing. I mean, there were some particular events that helped us just jumpstart that growth phase. A few of them were, for example, the fact that the financial sector in a country like Colombia started using SMS as a way to prevent fraud. So today, actually, I'm sure you've used this. You might be using your credit card or your debit card. Most banks out there offer some sort of alert or notification service, either through their apps or through SMS for people who want to have like more reliability on those notifications. So back then, SMS was the only option to really have a real-time alert on what was happening in your accounts. So that was an inflection point for Inalambria. So companies started growing faster because most banks wanted that type of service, and we were the provider of that infrastructure. So we were pretty much one of the first software as a service companies in providing a utility service like SMS in Colombia back in 2003. And that was very exciting. Technology was very early on. We were using very early versions of the web services standards and things like that. But over time, what happened was that the business kept growing, the infrastructure kept growing as well. traffic. We started doing, just to give you some numbers, we started doing, I don't know, a couple thousand messages per month. Those were messages that we were sending from customers to their, from our business customers to their end users that were their customers. And I don't know, 5 years later, we were doing hundreds of millions of messages per month. So those were very interesting times. But what happened over time, Sebastian, was that it was not that fun anymore, to be honest. I'm really passionate about, I learned this from my dad. I'm really passionate about creating things from scratch, setting up new teams, trying to set up a direction, try to put everyone on board and to follow that direction. And so that's my passion. And so I realized that, and basically I talked to my partner, Agustin. I told him, Agustin, I think it's time for me to move on and to start something new. But before that, I really want to go and do an MBA, because that was one of the things that I had in my checklist. And I had it in my checklist because, Sebastian, I previous to that, I didn't formally work at a company. I mean, I did the work at Microsoft as an intern. And previous to that, I did other things as well. But I always felt that I really wanted to work at a company, try to learn how companies work. I mean, organizational stuff and how these big corporations make decisions and all of that. So that was something that I was really fascinated with. But within a startup, you cannot live that. So I basically said to myself, okay, I think an MBA could be a good way to fast forward that learning process. At an MBA, you learn a lot about business cases, and you read a lot about what companies do, what type of decisions they make. And so that was like a very condensed version of exposing myself to a lot of experience. And I remember that during my MBA, I had the opportunity to do an internship at a startup. And then basically what I concluded after that was that I didn't want to work for a company anymore. I really wanted to continue working with my companies and create new things. And that was the beginning of Twnel, the new company, and the company that I'm working on right now. So just to give you some context, when I started Inalambria, there was I think just to see it in that sense, there was an inflection point. It was a shift in the industry. So from phones to text messages. So now the mobile networks were no longer used only for phone calls. They could now be used for something else. And there was a big opportunity. The problem was that opportunity was within the control of the mobile operators. Yeah, so you really had to work under their rules. And with that restriction, we built this company called Inalambria. But what happened in 2008 and 2009, the arrival of platforms, of the mobile platforms, was that I'm sure you weren't even born there, Sebastian. So what happened back then was that there was another inflection point in the industry. So you no longer had to rely on mobile operators to innovate in the industry. So you basically could build an app, put it in an app store, and that app could help millions of people complete a job, a task, or do something. So, and we focused specifically on the messaging side of things. We had a lot of experience in messaging. So it was like 10 years of experience doing messaging for businesses. So we started seeing how these new companies like WhatsApp and other messengers were just growing so fast. And we said to ourselves, what if we build something that is messaging oriented, but also it's thought from the ground based on the needs of the companies. So that's the beginning of the Twnel. So right after graduation at our MBA, we basically started this new company, and that new company is Twnel. And just to give you some context there, Twnel it's a mobile messaging workflow automation service. So we basically help companies who have thousands, hundreds, or even more, 100,000 or more deskless users. So we're talking about drivers, we're talking about nurses, we're talking about technicians, all of the ones who are not fortunate to work on a screen all the time, but they are working out there in the field, and they need some support on their phones to make to have their job done. So that's what we do, Twnel. It's a messaging-based service for companies, and we help them automate many of the processes that they have to execute on a daily basis. Yeah.
What do you think is your favorite part of a startup? Because I've talked to one other entrepreneur, and he said that the one thing that kind of got kind of annoying when his company got a little bit too big was that he couldn't pivot or make kind of drastic decisions as easily. Was that the same for you?
Well, I would say that in my case is when you start having some problems that all the companies have, which are clearly from a human kind of perspective, organizational problems. So let's say that you have a tension between sales and marketing, or let's say that you have some sort of, those are natural things, and those happen in every single company out there. They're very normal. But when you're in a very early stage, it feels like you are on a rock band, because everyone is super synced, everyone is super synchronized. There are no distractions at all. Everyone's so aligned. I mean, you do this, I'm doing this, otherwise, or maybe I have to do this tomorrow, I have to change. But everyone's working so in a so tight way that it just works. I mean, that's how you do so many things at the beginning. But over time, people who are pretty much generalists become specialists, and you start creating areas and silos, and so things get a little bit they have a different rhythm when you start growing as a company. But I would say that the magical moments happen at the beginning, when you have this huge whiteboard and you start doing things on that, and you get input from your team, and you all commit to doing that and basically launching it in record time. Those are the kind of moments that really, I still remember them. Those are the real beauty moments of a startup. Yeah.
Do you find any kind of, I won't say redeeming, but do you find what are your favorite parts about a company that is a little bit larger?
So when you're a larger company, perhaps one of the interesting things about it is that as a founder, that little thing that you started with a lot of hesitation, with a lot of doubts, and with a lot of uncertainty at the beginning, that becomes something that it basically has repeatability. So basically, if it's a service, you start selling this to more and more companies, and more and bigger companies start buying it. So it's just beautiful to see that something that was just a simple idea at the beginning, or something that you not even you were really confident about it, now is something that creates value for businesses out there, in the case of the B2B company or B2C for consumers. So I think that is the magical thing also that happens when you start growing. I mean, seeing that this little baby that you had, little product, now it's a more mature product, and it really creates impact out there for thousands or millions of individuals. So in the case of Inalambria, for example, I'm really proud that we touch every Colombian every 2 months. So pretty much every Colombian gets an SMS message from Inalambria, from some customer out there, either a bank or an insurance company or a healthcare company. So they all get touched by our infrastructure. And that's something that people don't know, because they just get messages from their bank or whatever, but we are part of that. We make that possible. So we really feel proud of being able to do that. And in the case of Twnel, it's a little bit different, because one of the goals that we're really looking for in Twnel is we are empowering this new generation of mobile workers. It turns out, Sebastian, that out there, 80%, around 80% of the working population, it's deskless. So they don't work in front of a computer again. They're the obscure generation. They're the forgotten generation of workers. There haven't been too many innovations for them. So we really are in the mission to empower this new generation of connected workers, and seeing drivers, seeing technicians, seeing people who are just getting to know technology for the first time, seeing them use your technology to accomplish things, to be more efficient, to be more productive, but also to be able to get home earlier so they can play with their kids, because technology is helping them do things faster. That's really fulfilling for us. Yeah. So those are the kind of things that when you start scaling and you start making more impact, those are the things that really motivate not only you as founder, but the rest of your team.
I want to talk about, how did you come up with the idea to help with deskless workers? Because I've seen that you although you do have a massive background with mobile, with text messages and kind of mobile ideas, how did you get introduced to helping deskless workers?
That's a great question. I don't know. Again, it's basically a combination of factors. Coming from an emerging market like Colombia, also having spent a few years in the US, being exposed to what was happening here, also coming back to do my MBA here in the US, and seeing what things were happening in the industry. And again, having this connection, one feet in the US tech industry and the other feeding for Colombia, which is our country, mother country. That's where my wife and I were born, and my son Mateus was born as well. So having those worlds in your head really help you start thinking a little bit different. I think that gives you an advantage. I don't think for a US company, it was obvious to start working on this problem, which is empowering mobile first users. In the US, everyone's pretty much deskless, desk bound, actually. Everyone uses a phone, and everyone uses a computer. Pretty much everyone has access to it. That's not the case in our countries, in emerging markets. So again, we were really motivated by this idea of a new generation of workers that were using technology to achieve things. And we ended up finding out that most of them use simple text messaging to do a lot of things. And most companies out there who have people in the field are relying on basic messaging services like WhatsApp and others to operate. So when we talk to those companies, they told us, we feel like we're a little bit hijacked by WhatsApp, because that's the only thing that we have, because there's nothing else. So that motivated us to start working on this project, which is a messaging-based service where we can automate processes. Companies can create things on top of the platform. And it's basically a platform where you can build things on top, which makes it even more exciting as well. But just to answer your question, again, I think it's your background and those factors that combine together make you think a little bit different, I think.
When you made your second company, did you find yourself kind of comparing it to the start of your first company?
Well, both have. I mean, first company was a SaaS, so a software as a service, as wireless. Second one, Inalambria, was again the same thing, software as a service. Third company, Twnel, is a SaaS company as well. So even though the three of them are SaaS companies, all of them have had different trajectories. So the first one was I would say that it was a faster trajectory. The second one, it took us a lot of years just to get to the point of like really exploding the SMS traffic, as we call it. And Twnel, it was totally different challenge. I mean, it has taken us many years to put it where it is right now, and to mature the product where it is right now. So we are confident that it's capable of handling thousands and hundreds of thousands of users on the platform. But I would say those have been different trajectories, and I didn't expect one to be the same as the other. I think you just realize that they have to be different because they tackle different problems. They have different type of users, different type of challenges as well. Yeah.
So you never had any doubt when, let's say, when you were creating Inalambria Internacional, that you're like, oh, this is taking a little bit longer than S Wireless. Like, am I doing something wrong, or should I just keep on going?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, to be honest, and I would say that every entrepreneur out there would answer the same question. You always have doubts about the future of your company, because maybe at the beginning you have too much more of those, like really hard moments where you're not really sure about how things are gonna end up, and you're not sure if you're gonna be able to make it to next month. And over time, those things disappear a little bit. But it's always a roller coaster. I mean, it's I think you've heard this before, but it's basically maybe the good days are the ones who help you compensate for the bad ones. But you have a lot of bad days out there. So it's most bad days, and eventually one good day. But bad. So you start getting used to it, and because at the end, it's not about just focusing on the end goal. It's about enjoying the journey. I mean, if you're someone who we're passionate about something and really want to get to the point, it's about enjoying how you get there, and those hard moments are the ones who make you stronger. Yeah.
What do you consider a non-negotiable in any of your businesses?
Yeah, that's a great question. First thing that came to mind was respect. I think that that's something that I think it's an essential part of any startup. So when it comes to making sure that everyone's aligned and everyone feels like they're part of the team, I think respect just wins it all. If you feel respect, if you're respectful and everyone's respectful, that's something that builds trust and helps you build confidence with teams. Yeah, I would say that would be my first one.
Where do you think you're gonna Twnel, or maybe a different company, is going to point towards in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm really excited about what's going to happen, or what's happening right now in the tech industry. So I'm sure you've been following this over the last few months, but we're in this again, a new inflection point. So it's similar to the inflection point that we had in 2009 with smartphones, or in 2001 with messaging and so forth, and the internet itself. And so here we're talking about how regenerative technologies, our AI can basically help you do things that were not possible before. And the combination of that, and also the combination of the conversational format, is creating just a massive opportunity. And we have been in the messaging industry. We're a firm believer that the conversational format is the way to go. That's the most natural way to interact with technology. Chat, the typical interfaces that we grew up with are going to change, and are going to change in favor of conversational interfaces. Now, if you combine that with the power of the new AI, LLMs, and all these things that are being built right now as we speak, that's going to be huge for the industry. So we are really excited about how we can integrate new technologies to what we have been building for the last few years. And we're really doing a lot of experiments right now. We don't know what's going to end up working well or not, but it's an exciting moment to be in. Yeah.
How do you see the contrast of Google and Apple and many other large tech companies are kind of creating, or they are doing, mass exoduses of employees just because of like the recession and also that they aren't growing like they used to. But now you see the not invention, but I guess the mass popularity of like ChatGPT and other AIs. How do you see like that new frontier and also the kind of what seems to be like not dwindling, but we now see a cap on what kind of the internet has?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the companies that we used to admire a couple of years ago, the Googles, the Microsoft, the Metas, the Facebooks, back then, I think if you ask your dad and you ask him about AT&T, for example, or a company like Hewlett Packard or something, those were the companies that they used to admire back then. Yeah, if you were, I don't know, if you were an electrical engineer, I would imagine in the US, you would dream of working at Bell Labs, yeah, or AT&T's labs, and that was the dream job. Same happened with these companies, the ones that you were mentioning. Those were the iconic companies representing an industry, and they all have just tremendous business models, super strong business models. But it looks like suddenly from one year to the other, they're not that exciting as they used to. Because there's this new inflection point, as we said, this new window of opportunities just opening up, where there are so many potential use cases and applications of technology that this opens doors for startups and for companies that are just thinking, starting something, or just a couple of students in a garage. So I think it's the we're in that precise moment, and you are very lucky, Sebastian, because you are seeing this right now from your perspective. You're in high school, right? Okay, so you're gonna end up finishing high school. You're gonna make a smart decision to go and follow your passion, and you're gonna start seeing how this inflection point is gonna start creating a new generation of big companies. It might be the case that these giant companies are gonna defend themselves, and they're gonna be the ones who are gonna be able to. But it's also possible that there's gonna be a new generation of Googles or companies that are going to be out there fighting. But I think these are exciting times. I'm really passionate. Also exciting times, but also dangerous times when it comes to the power of technology applied in a bad direction. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw one thing. It was ChatGPT 4, where it's like all kind of, I guess, easier intro level coding is just so easily done by it. How do you think
Yeah.
that will affect like new companies where it's like, would it be maybe easier for them to start up because they don't have to, let's say, pay someone for that job? Or what do you think?
I totally agree with that. I mean, I think that, and I heard this the other day on a podcast, that there are many opportunities right now being right there on the table, right? If you want to take advantage of what's going on, from let's say from the opportunities around the plugins for ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is becoming a platform so that you can connect to different data sources and different third parties that can do things in an integrated way. So the Expedia examples, the Instacart examples, where you just ask something to that ChatGPT, and it will basically do the thing physically and will deliver the groceries to your door. Those kind of things are going to happen. So there is a new, let's say, app store moment out there happening. So that's one direction. There's another direction where I personally think there's also a lot of opportunities, which are the agents, which are these, let's say, autonomous entities that can use LLMs, they can use ChatGPT and others to recursively solve problems. So it's not just about just asking ChatGPT one smart question or one series of smart questions to get an answer, but also it's about making an agent that can ask one and asks again for the next one, and it will just start doing this in a systematic way until it finds the goal that you basically put the agent to work with, to work for. So agents is just another huge dimension of opportunities. And the third one that I personally see is what you just described. I think there is an opportunity around building the same type of companies that we know of right now, but with 10x less overhead. So again, right now you can do what it would take you 10 engineers to do. Maybe today you can do it with one or two, if they're augmented by ChatGPT and they have these powers of Copilot and other tools. So I personally think that that's going to be another vector of growth. I mean, companies being started from zero, very small teams, very nimble teams, very humble teams that are going to be just doing the work that normally a company of 10x the size would normally do. So imagine the power of that. Imagine the power of someone would call them the power of the rebels. Yeah, because they have the power and they have the tools to do more things with less. So I think that, again, it's just exciting times. It's not clear where is this going to end up, but I think in those three dimensions and the plugins, ChatGPT plugins, the auto agents or autonomous agents, and the making of companies with much less overhead, that's going to be those are going to be fields that we're going to be talking about next few years.
What challenges does your company face regularly that you think young people could help solve?
Oh yeah, it's a good question. So right now we have something that I learned from working with Microsoft. This is fairly new. It's something we set up almost a year and a half ago. We call them the SWAT team, like the SWAT, like the ones who go and do interventions in banks and robberies and those kind of things. So we call them the SWAT team. And the SWAT team right now is basically a group of students, like first to second year, third year students, universities in Colombia, and they basically help us build on top of our platform. So remember that I told you that Twnel it's a platform. So what that means is that we basically build the building blocks so that companies can start building things on top of it. And that makes it very unique because pretty much we can solve a lot of problems with that configuration. It's hard when it comes to selling because companies don't buy platforms. They buy solutions to your problems, but it gives us a lot of flexibility to solve multiple problems. So what we're doing with the SWAT team is that when we have a customer and the customer has a specific need, we're just sending the SWAT team, and these brilliant minds go there and just in a matter of days, they use their own platform to build a solution for the customer and do that in record time. So they don't have a deep expertise in the platform itself. They know how to build on top of it. And we make sure that everything works as expected. So I think there's a generation, we work with a lot of students in that sense, and it has worked for us very well. And we see it as a way for a company to start to get to know talent. So we see who's doing good job, who's doing the extra mile, and we promote them to another type of responsibility. So for us, I think it has been a great way to understand the potential that new, fresh talent has in the company. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. I kind of asked for a better interview. I'm sure that many young entrepreneurs will benefit greatly from your knowledge and experience. Thank you.
Sebastian, it was a pleasure to be here with you. Thanks for those smart questions, and I wish you the best of luck in your journey.
Of course. Thank you.